Writing for Academic Success in Psychology, Unit 5, Summarizing Other Sources. This video is about 16 minutes long, but if you complete all the tasks, you should expect to spend about 30 to 40 minutes on the unit in total. In Unit 2, we talked about how academic writing is objective. One key aspect of objectivity in academic writing is that you should use your reading, textbooks, lecture notes, and particularly other academic research in the form of journal articles, to provide the support for your arguments, rather than simply stating your own opinion on a topic or point. There are three main ways of doing this: summarizing, including synthesizing several sources, paraphrasing, and quoting. We'll focus on summarizing in this unit, but I'll briefly mention paraphrasing and quoting as it's important to know the differences between these methods of incorporating your reading into your assignments. In lab reports, this will usually be of most relevance to writing the introduction and discussion sections. Quoting involves reproducing anything from a few words to several sentences of the original source in your own writing, word for word. In other words, exactly as it appears in the original. Quoting may be useful when you want to give a definition of a concept, or when you want to state a fact which you feel the author has communicated in a particularly distinctive or eloquent way. Quotations should always be referenced with the author, date, and page number, e.g. Godfrey, 2013, page 45. And should always be placed in double quotation marks so that it is completely clear where the quotation starts and ends and where it comes from. We'll cover referencing and citations further in Unit 6. However, quotations should only be used sparingly because they don't allow you to demonstrate your own understanding. If you can communicate an idea in your own words, it shows your lecturers that you have thought about and understand the meaning of the words and haven't just read the words themselves. Therefore, paraphrasing and summarizing are the methods you should be using most often to incorporate your reading into your assignments. Paraphrasing involves expressing a single idea or piece of information from a source in your own words, and in a way that allows you to integrate that information into your own argument and to express complicated ideas more simply. However, because you are essentially reporting another writer's specific point or idea, paraphrases should be treated in a similar way as quotations in terms of how they are cited. Though you don't put them in quotation marks, APA guidelines recommend providing the page number for paraphrases, just like for a quote, particularly if the paraphrase is from a very long work, such as a book or thesis, and it would otherwise be difficult for the reader to find the exact source in the original text. However, this is not a hard and fast rule, so you may want to check with your module tutor what their expectations are. Paraphrasing differs from summarizing, in that when you paraphrase, you convey specific ideas or information, perhaps from a single sentence or two in the source text, but in their entirety, while summarizing involves conveying the main point from a much larger text, such as the findings from a research study or the overall conclusion of an argumentative article. Here's an example of a good paraphrase. Note that the paraphrase is about the same length as the original because it conveys most or all of the information in the source extract, though in the paraphrase it's in a different order and using different words. Notice also how the citation shows exactly where the paraphrase begins, and the next sentence contains a reminder reference to the authors of the study, along with a reporting verb, note, so that it is clear to the reader that the second sentence continues the paraphrase. Summarizing and synthesizing takes paraphrasing a step further, by conveying the main points, ideas, findings or conclusions of one or more much longer sources in your own words. Most of the time we do this to give evidence for and support our own points and arguments, or to give an overview of e.g. different authors' perspectives or different research study findings on a particular topic. Both of these purposes for summarizing are important when writing lab reports because we need to be objective, provide support for our points, and provide the reader with a succinct overview of previous research relevant to the experiment being reported, particularly in the introduction section. Look at the following paragraphs from the introduction section of a research article. How many sources are summarized in each paragraph, and how long is the summary in each case? What are the different purposes of each paragraph, and how does this relate to the length of the summaries? There's not enough room to show both paragraphs at once, so pause the video now in order to read the first paragraph and consider your answers to the questions. Then resume and repeat for the second paragraph. Or use the transcript to read the paragraphs instead. Here's the first paragraph. And here's the second. Pause the video again to read it and answer the questions, then resume for feedback. Feedback. The first paragraph summarizes a whopping 12 sources, mainly in the form of 2 lists of the various forms of poor health which pessimistic explanatory style has been linked to in the first half of the paragraph, and aspects of ill health that specific dimensions of the pessimistic explanatory style have been found to affect negatively in the second half. It's unlikely your lecturers would expect you to include 12 citations in a single paragraph, but the first paragraph is a good example of how summaries might comprise no more than a single sentence or even a couple of words, especially when multiple sources are synthesized like this in a single sentence or paragraph. The second paragraph, however, focuses on a single source and summarizes it in more detail, taking up the whole of the paragraph. You can probably identify phrases and sentences that summarize different lab report sections in this paragraph, including the overall conclusion, the sample of participants, what was investigated, and what was found. So a summary could be anything from a few words to a whole paragraph. The reason for this variation relates to purpose. The purpose of the first paragraph is to give a brief overview of research findings related to the topic in question, the relationship between pessimistic explanatory style and ill health, and also to show that the topic is one of significance, as so many have researched it. On the other hand, the second paragraph aims to provide more detail of a particularly relevant study. The writer signals this very explicitly at the beginning of the paragraph, of most relevance to this study. This study is considered important in terms of providing the rationale for the research being reported, and therefore the writer devotes more space to it than the less directly relevant research summarized in the first paragraph. Let's consider the kind of language we use in academic summaries by considering these 2 paragraphs on pessimistic explanatory style again. Reread the paragraphs, identifying the phrases the authors have used to introduce different aspects of the research, such as X has been linked to Y. Pause the video to identify the phrases, then continue for feedback. Here's the second. Feedback. There are several phrases, and in particular verbs, that report the act of research and research findings, like studied, investigated, found, and showed. These examples are all used to introduce different research and their findings. Because of the type of studies they are summarizing, there are also several phrases that allow the writer to indicate correlations or relationships between different variables, such as X has been linked to Y, X has been related to Y, or X may negatively, adversely, or positively affect Y. These kinds of phrases are incredibly common in summaries of other research, and it is not plagiarism if you make use of such frames in your own writing. Every time you read an article, pay attention to these kinds of phrases and how often they are used by writers when summarizing other research. Keep a logbook or devote a section of your vocabulary logbook to recording these phrases so you can utilize them in your own writing. The academic phrase bank contains a whole host of similar phrases, especially in the section on referring to sources. The transcript contains a sample of other phrases from the phrase bank that might be particularly useful. Another important feature of the language of summaries is whether we talk about research and findings in the present or past tense. Consider these two phrases. Why is the first in the present tense, has, shown, or shows, while the second is in the past, investigated, found, concluded? Because in the first phase, the writer is talking about research findings in general, and which are still true or relevant at the present time. For this, we use the simple present tense, research shows, or often the present perfect, research has shown. However, as soon as we want to talk about a specific piece of research that occurred in the past, we use the past tense. Buchanan investigated, found, or concluded. These switches between present and past tense are clearly made in our sample summary paragraphs. In this extract, the first sentence introduces the variables and focus of research generally, so uses the present tense. However, as soon as the writers begin to summarize Buchanan 1995 in detail, they change to the past tense and remain in the past tense throughout the summary. To practice this, complete the following text by putting the given verb in brackets into the right form, present or present perfect, or past tense, according to this principle of present for general statements and past for specific studies. The first has been completed for you to illustrate the task. Pause the video as usual, then restart for feedback. Feedback. Here are the correct answers. How did you do? Did you find it easy to identify when you needed to use the present or past tense? Notice that it's not necessarily always completely clear-cut. In lines 7 and 8, either present or past tense would work here, because though a single investigation is being summarized, the writer has already used recently presented evidence to indicate this, so the variables then summarized as the evidence could be considered general information. So either present or past tense would work here. The writer of the extract actually chose the present tense, perhaps to make the research feel more immediate and relevant. Effective summaries start with effective notes. It's a good idea to write your notes in your own words, and then use your notes, rather than the source, as the basis for writing summaries. That way, there's no chance you will plagiarize the original text unintentionally. Here are some suggested steps. Step 1. Skim the article, noting headings, sections, and topic. This gives you an overview of the whole text and enables you to complete Step 2 effectively. The abstract is also useful for getting the overall gist of a text. Step 2. Generate questions relevant to your purpose and the topic, or use why, how, what, so what. Step 3. Read the article in more detail, taking notes of important points and answering your questions as you go. By looking for the answers to your questions as you read, you will be reading actively rather than just passively taking in information with no particular purpose. Step 4. Write a 1 or 2 sentence summary of each section, or 1 sentence responses to each WH question, based on your notes and using the kinds of language we've been looking at. Step 5. Incorporate some or all of the summaries into your assignments, choosing the level of detail appropriate to your purpose and keeping overall length and word count in mind. The final task of this unit is to have a go at summarizing a text yourself. If you want, you can choose a research article related to your lab report experiment, because then you might be able to make use of your summary in your lab report. However, I've provided a short text for you to summarize if you'd prefer. It's perhaps a little too long for you to see it clearly on the video, however, so I suggest you download the transcript to read the source in full. Follow the 5 steps and make use of the phrases to help you introduce the research and write first a 1-sentence summary and second a short paragraph of 3 or 4 sentences, a bit like the Buchanan 1995 summary in the earlier exercises. Remember to check you are using the right tense for general statements versus the specifics of particular research, and also remember to indicate the source. There will be no specific feedback if you use a different source for this exercise, but I'll provide some feedback on the Robinson text. Pause the video to complete all the steps, then restart to get feedback if you want it. Feedback. So how did you do? Here is an example one-sentence summary and an example short paragraph summary, adapted from Godfrey 2013. Notice the key phrases of the type we considered earlier, such as research has demonstrated or shown that, they found that X led to Y or X resulted in Y, and they found no evidence to suggest that. Notice also how the general statements are in the present tense, but the specifics of the experiment reported are in the past tense. If you have any other questions about what we've covered in this unit, or would like further tips or guidance on summarising, do get in touch and I'll do what I can to help. Visit psychenglish.wordpress.com or email me at k.bannister@uel.ac.uk.